Sound, gentle, acoustic guitar intro. Fading slightly under narration, the sound of splintering lumber. That's not exactly the morning alarm a man wants. Especially not a man who's spent 30 years building things to last. But there it was again, my heavy oak gate, groaning like a broken bone as a gleaming black escalade. Driven by someone I'll call Beverly, just barreled through it like my land was a cheap paper target. For her, my 15 acres of quiet wasn't property. It was just a 10-minute cut across the gravel to the new freeway entrance. She didn't slow down. She didn't wave. Just blasted past with that perfect, dismissive smirk frozen on her face. Like the queen of some concrete kingdom. The first time it happened, I thought, okay, mistake, GPS error. The second time, I figured she was testing the waters ... But by the third time, it wasn't a test anymore. It was a dare. A clear challenge flung right onto my own doorstep. And let me tell you, I'd built enough foundations in my life to know when it was time to stand firm. See? When I bought the old Whisper Creek Ranch, I pictured peace-wide open skies, the smell of pine, a solid gate that swung closed with a satisfying final thud every night. After decades of construction dust in my lungs, and every single day dictated by someone else's clipboard HOA rules telling me what color my front door had to be, wanted to breathe. I wanted quiet. My ranch sat right on the edge of Redwood Bluff Estates, a sprawling, self-important HOA-governed subdivision that honestly had more rules than the IRS. But the best part was, my deed was outside their jurisdiction. I wasn't in their club, I didn't pay their ridiculous dues, and I certainly didn't answer to their president, Beverly. That heavy oak gate I built myself, lined with iron hinges, that was my line in the sand. And I was damn proud of it. I hadn't even been there a month before I met her, Beverly. She had the perfect, expensive silk scarf, the oversized designer shades, and an Escalade that probably cost more than my first house. She rolled her tinted window down halfway, gave me a tight, lovely place smile that didn't touch her eyes. And before I could even reply with a full sentence, she hit the gas and drove right through my closed gate. The hinges screamed, the oak scraped the gravel, and she was halfway across my pasture in a cloud of dust, like she was late for her own coronation. I stood there, honestly just dumbfounded. That dismissive half-wave she gave me in the rearview mirror. No, that wasn't a mistake. That was pure, unadulterated entitlement. I spent that evening repairing the gate, muttering to myself, reinforcing the hinges, setting the posts deeper in the soil. I chalked it up to bad manners and hoped the headache wouldn't happen again. But of course it did. A week later, same engine rumble, same sight, Beverly's black beast barreling straight toward my gate, not even tapping the brakes. This time, I ran out onto the porch, waving my arms, shouting, "Hey, that's private property." Her response? A short, sharp laugh as she leaned out the window and shouted back, "It's a designated community access, dear." Before she disappeared, designated community access. My blood boiled. I knew my deed backward and forward. There was no easement, no shared road, no right-of-way, but she said it with such authority, like it was a commandment carved into stone by the local zoning god. The local feed store confirmed my suspicion. Two old-timers shaking their heads when I mentioned the black Escalade. "You've got Beverly driving through your place?" one asked, spitting sunflower seeds. "Good luck with that. She runs the HOA like a little feudal kingdom. She'll bleed you dry with fines if you cross her," the other chimed in. Let her be? Let her tear down my property every week like she owned it? Absolutely not. Not on my land, not in this lifetime. The third time, I actually caught her before she hit it. I dropped the logs I was stacking and marched out. She saw me, and her smirk appeared. "You really should keep this open," she said through her window. "It's a huge inconvenience," shot back. "This is my gate, my property." "You're trespassing," her lips curled. "Don't be so selfish. This road saves me 10 minutes every morning. It's about community spirit." I laughed, though it wasn't funny. "Lady, this is trespassing. You're damaging my property." That's when her smirk hardened. "You're new here. Maybe you don't understand. The board sets the rules around here. You're not above them. That word bored, the way she used it like she wore a divine crown. Because she chaired a group of busybodies, that was the spark that lit the fuse. I told her to turn around. She didn't. She drove through anyway, dust spraying my boots. It wasn't about wood and hinges anymore. It was about principle. Every splinter felt like a personal insult. Every dent was her laughing right in my face. Then, the worst part, other board members started following her lead. A convoy of luxury vehicles cruising across my ranch like it was their new access road. Waving at each other, waving at me like I was just the groundskeeper. One afternoon, I found a formal envelope tucked into my mailbox. Official HOA letterhead, a violation notice. My heart sank as I read the lie. The ranch gate at the entrance of your property does not conform to community aesthetics. Please remove it immediately or face fines. I nearly laughed myself sick. They were demanding I tear down the very gate they kept ramming through. I double-checked the records, no easements, no jurisdiction, but that letter felt like a declaration of war. Beverly wasn't just entitled, she was starting a genuine turf battle. I knew my little slice of peace had turned into a battleground. She got bolder afternoons, evenings, even late at night. One Sunday, I blocked her path with my old Chevy pickup, sat on the tailgate, sipping coffee, and waited. She pulled up, gave that smug grin. You're wasting your time. This road is for everyone, I replied. No, ma'am. This road is for me. The deed says so. She stood her ground, then finally whipped her SUV into reverse and screeched off. For a moment, I thought I'd won. The very next day, I came home to find my gate flat on the ground, posts snapped, hinges twisted like paper clips, fresh tire tracks running across my pasture. Beverly had escalated. I walked over to the HOA office one evening, ready for reason. She was sitting at a polished desk, looking up at me with pure disdain. We need to talk, I said. Oh, good, she replied sweetly. You're here about your fines. She slid a paper. Across the desk, violations totaling nearly $30,000. You're out of your mind. I'm not even in your HOA. She leaned back. Boundaries are flexible when community welfare is at stake. Boundaries are legal, I shot back, and mine aren't flexible. Her lips tightened. You'll regret this stubbornness. That was the moment. She wasn't just having a disagreement. This was a war of attrition. She would harass me, intimidate me, anything to break me down. The last straw came around midnight when I heard the screech of tires and the crash of wood splitting. I got out. There the gate was demolished again. In the distance, 3 sets of taillights shrinking. Beverly's in the lead, 2 board members behind. They were hooting like teenagers, making it clear my land was theirs now. I drove to the sheriff's office again, fuming. Same deputy, same advice. Without video proof, it's your word against Beverly's influence. That was it. If the law wouldn't protect me, I'd protect myself. I sat at my kitchen table, sketching ideas. Wood wasn't working. If I wanted Beverly to stop, I needed something she couldn't muscle through with horsepower and arrogance. Something that bit back. This wasn't about a gate anymore. It was about a trap. Structure that wouldn't just stop her, it would absolutely, definitively humiliate her. Sound, music becomes slightly more determined in building, reflecting the intensity of building. I woke up before dawn with the clearest resolve I'd felt in weeks. Beverly and her little HOA posse thought they had me cornered, but they'd forgotten one simple fact. I wasn't a man who gave up. I was a builder. I'd poured foundations. That outlasted hurricanes, and I sure as hell could build a gate to withstand Beverly. I started with steel, not the flimsy stuff, but industrial grade I'd salvaged years ago. I drilled down and sank 6-foot steel posts into concrete footings reinforced with rebar cages, turning the frame into something closer to a fortress entrance than a ranch gate. Then, I layered the front with thick oak planks, so from a distance, it still looked like my old, humble, easily broken wooden gate. But stopping her wasn't enough. I wanted to end the shortcut forever. I dug shallow trenches just beyond the gate and filled them with my surprise. Hardened steel spikes, set into concrete troughs, camouflaged perfectly beneath the gravel. If someone tried to ram through again, the gate would hold, and the spikes would shred their tires like paper. I worked through the nights, sweat running down my back, ignoring Beverly when she occasionally showed up to glare and record me with her phone. "You really think you can stop progress?" she sneered. I didn't even look up. "No," I muttered, sparks flying as I welded another seam, "but I can stop you." My old neighbor Hank stopped by one night, old rancher, face weathered like leather. "You're playing with fire. You know that," he said. "I know," I replied. She screamed harassment the second this backfires. He studied me, then chuckled. "Hell, I like your style. Need an extra pair of hands?" Together we finished the last reinforcements, checking every weld, every alignment. When we finally stepped back, the gate stood proud, deceptively simple on the outside, absolutely indestructible within. Hank grinned. "Looks just like the old one." I shook my head. "Not even close." Sound. Music fades to a calm, tense silence. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait. And if there was one thing I knew about Beverly, it was that she couldn't resist proving herself. She had to win, had to show dominance. It didn't take long. On a bright Saturday afternoon, the low, throaty growl of the Escalade rolled down the road, louder and louder until the gravel trembled. There she was, perfect scarf, perfect shades. That smug determination locked on her jaw. Behind her followed two other vehicles, the HOA treasurer's minivan and another board member sedan. A convoy of arrogance. Beverly didn't slow down. She revved harder, speeding up, as if the very act of destruction gave her power. I sat back in my chair, sipping my coffee, and watched. The moment her massive bumper hit the gate, it refused to budge. Instead of splintering, it stood unshaken, anchored to its steel core. The sound was like a gunshot, metal against metal, the echo of finality. Her SUV jolted violently, the front end crumpling with a sickening crunch. Airbags exploded. White smoke puffed from the windows. The tires shrieked against the gravel. As momentum carried her forward another foot before the steel held her like a fly caught in amber. And then came the spikes. As her rear tires skidded over the disguised trench, the steel teeth bit deep, ripping the rubber apart with a sound that made me wince even from the porch. Pop, pop, pop. Her Escalade sagged forward on shredded wheels, hissing like a wounded beast. The convoy behind her screeched to a halt, too late. The minivan swerved into the ditch, fishtailing before stalling. The sedan braked hard, horn blaring, narrowly avoiding piling into her bumper. Sound, silence. Broken only by the hiss of the SUV and distant birds, dust settled over the scene, hanging in the summer air like smoke after a battle. Then the screaming began. Beverly flung open her door, stumbling out in a cloud of airbag dust, her face twisted with fury and shock. "What have you done?" she shrieked, pointing at me. I stayed seated on the porch, calm as a preacher. "What I've done," I called back, "is stop you from trespassing." Her voice cracked into a shrill pitch. "This is illegal. You've put lives at risk." I stood slowly, walked down the steps, and approached the wreck. The bumper was bent like a crushed soda can. "You were warned," I said evenly. "Over and over. You chose this. The HOA will bury you in lawsuits." She trembled. "On what grounds?" I tapped my pocket, pulling out the small remote. "You drove through a private gate on private property without permission. And lucky for me, I installed cameras this time." I pointed to the posts. Sure enough, small security cams, red recording lights flashing. Her face went pale beneath the dust. You wouldn't," she whispered. "I would," I replied. Neighbors had gathered, drawn by the crash, phones out, recording every second. "Looks like the Queen's lost her crown," a voice muttered loudly, followed by laughter. The HOA treasurer crawled out of the minivan, limping slightly. His clipboard still clutched like a shield. The sheriff eventually arrived. Beverly ran to him, screaming. He set a trap. He sabotaged the road. The sheriff turned to me. "That true?" "This isn't a public road," I said. "It's my private property. She's been trespassing for weeks. I reinforced my gate and installed cameras." You'll find everything you need on the footage. You can't. Ma'am, the sheriff interrupted, his voice sharp. If these cameras show what he says they do, you're the one in trouble. I walked up to her wrecked Escalade, tapped the hood, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, shortcuts closed. Beverly! The crowd erupted in laughter, whistles echoing down the road. Beverly covered her face, retreating back into her ruined SUV. I watched as the tow trucks arrived to drag away her convoy of shame. And as the dust settled once more, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Peace. Because she had finally learned. The hard way that some gates don't just break. Some gates fight back. Sound. Music becomes thoughtful and reflective. But Beverly, she never admitted defeat. The very next morning, I woke up to a thick envelope notice of legal action. The HOA was suing me for reckless endangerment, property damage, and obstruction of easement. They wanted me to pay for her emotional distress and the repairs to her Escalade. The audacity of it almost made me laugh again. I drove straight to see Martha, sharp-eyed attorney who specialized in property law. She leafed through the papers. Classic HOA overreach, she smirked. They're banking on you folding. Folding, I told her. Isn't in my vocabulary? Martha filed a countersuit, trespassing. Destruction of private property, harassment, and attempted fraud with false fines. We had everything on tape. The court hearing was where it all truly unraveled. Beverly strutted in, red suit, binders stacked high, acting like she already owned the courtroom. Her lawyer launched into a dramatic speech about my booby-trapped gate, and Martha stood up. Calm, precise, deadly. Your Honor, she began, the evidence will show that my client's property lies outside HOA jurisdiction. These claims are fraudulent. As for endangerment, the only danger was caused by the reckless trespassing of the HOA president. She clicked a remote, and the courtroom screens lit up. Video footage rolled. Beverly's SUV slamming into the steel, the tires bursting on the spikes, the neighbors laughing. Then the earlier clips. Every time she rammed through, every arrogant smirk, every shouted community easement. When Beverly was called to testify, she melted down. I am the president, she screamed, pointing at me. He can't defy the board. The judge slammed his gavel. This is a court of law, not your board meeting. Sit down. Her credibility was shredded. The ruling came swift. The court dismissed the HOA's claims entirely. The judge ordered the HOA to pay me damages for trespassing and property destruction. Beverly was fined personally for harassment. The footage was released into the public record. Within a week, clips of Beverly's crash went viral. HOA Queen versus the Gate of Justice. The humiliation was complete. Neighbors who had long been silent finally spoke up. Stories of her bullying poured out. Board members resigned one by one. Beverly was isolated, her power gone. Sound, acoustic guitar fades up, settling into a comfortable rhythm. I sat on my porch one evening, watching the sun sink behind my newly indestructible gate. The war was won, and it was exposed for what it was. But as sweet as the silence was, I knew better than to relax completely. A few weeks later, a certified letter arrived. It was from Beverly, offering a settlement if I would simply agree to take down my menacing gate and allow limited community passage. She was trying to claw back control, dressing it up as healing divisions. I laughed and wrote her a response. 1 page, 2 sentences. There is no community easement. I own the road, and I have the deed to prove it. See, here's the twist. All this time, while Beverly was screaming about community rights, I had quietly gone back through the county records. And not only was I outside their jurisdiction, the road she loved so much. The shortcut she claimed as community property. It wasn't even listed as public. It was mine, deeded to me, paid for in full. When she received my response, the meltdown was immediate and final. She stormed onto my property one last time, waving the letter. This is fraud. You can't own that road. I walked calmly to the edge of my porch. Check the records, Beverly. County clerk's office. Deeds in my name. Always has been. Her face twisted in utter disbelief. That's impossible. No, I said. What's impossible is you ever setting foot on this road again. Consider yourself trespassed. When she realized she was outnumbered, outrecorded, and utterly out of power, something in her broke. She let out a strangled scream, stomped her heel into the dirt, and spun around and stormed off for the last time. My ranch finally became the sanctuary I'd imagined. The gate stood tall, stronger than ever, guarding not just my land, but my dignity. Sometimes, justice doesn't arrive in the form of sheriffs or judges. Sometimes it comes in the shape of a guida gate that refuses to fall, no matter how many times arrogance tries to break it down. Looking back, this story wasn't just about a gate or a ridiculous HOA president. It was about boundaries and the courage it takes to defend them. Life will always have people like Beverly who will push past your lines, laugh at your warnings, and act like you're no means nothing. They'll test your patience until you either break or you build something stronger. I chose to build, and that's the lesson I want to leave with you. Your gate might not be made of steel and concrete. It might be your time, your energy, your dignity, or your peace of mind. But whatever it is, don't let anyone trample through it just because they think they can. Set your boundaries. Reinforce them. And when someone refuses to respect them, don't back down. Because at the end of the day, respect isn't given, it's earned. And sometimes you have to demand it. So I'll ask you this. Right now, what's the gate in your life that you need to reinforce and protect? Drop a comment below. Tell me your own boundary war story. If you enjoyed this tale of sweet, sweet revenge, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Trust me, I have plenty more stories about building things to last. Sound. Music swells and fades out.